Hello, sports fans. Welcome to Sports Central. Today, we're going to go over Week 12 college ball rankings. So, going over last week's ranking, what those teams did in Week 11. Last week, at number 10, I had Ole Miss. They lost to Georgia 52-17. 9 was Penn State. They lost to Michigan 24-15. 8 was Alabama. They beat Kentucky easily 49-21. 7 was Texas. They beat TCU 29-26. 6 was Oregon. They beat USC 36-27. 5 was Ohio State. They dominated Michigan State, winning 38-3. 4 was Florida State. They barely beat Miami, winning 27-20. 3 was Washington. They beat Utah 35-28. 2 was Michigan. They beat Penn State 24-15. And 1 was Georgia. They destroyed Ole Miss, winning 52-17. This week's rankings coming in at number 10, I've got Oregon State. They jump into the top 10 after a dominant win over Stanford, 62-17. Running back Damian Martinez had an insane game with 146 yards and 4 rushing touchdowns. And defensively, Oregon State was great, forcing Stanford into 4 turnovers. Now, Oregon State looked really good this week, and that is very good for them as they have 2 really tough games to close out the season when they host Washington next week before going to Oregon to finish out the regular season. But a great win for Oregon State. They enter at number 10 and are in my top 10 for the first time this season. Coming in at number 9, we've got Louisville. They're another team that moves into the top 10 as a result of losses to Penn State and Ole Miss, as well as a win for them. But Louisville enters at 9 after a 31-24 win over Virginia on Thursday. It was not a good win, beating a bad Virginia team by just 7 points. But Louisville is now 9-1 and likely looking at a spot in the SEC Championship game. Although they haven't officially clinched a spot yet, that is the direction it's headed. But it wasn't a good win for Louisville. They enter my top 10 for the first time this season and win at number 9. Coming in at number 8, we've got Alabama. So they remain at number 8 after a good 49-21 win over Kentucky. Quarterback Jalen Milroe played an outstanding game with 6 total touchdowns, 3 passing, 3 rushing. And Alabama has really improved since their early season struggles. Their offense has been much better as of late, scoring over 40 points in back-to-back games. And a big reason why has been quarterback Jalen Milroe. He has been great and steadily improved this season, as has Alabama's offense. And Alabama enters number 8. They've officially clinched a spot in the SEC Championship game against Georgia, which could end up being a playoff game and deciding spot in the playoffs. So Alabama enters at number 8. Number 7, we've got Texas. They remain at 7, but they were not great. They nearly blew a 26-6 lead over TCU. They led by 20 points heading into the fourth quarter, but they let TCU score 20 points in the fourth quarter. But they were able to hold on for the win. Quinn Ewers returned from injury and was good with 317 yards, touchdown, and a pick. But the concerning thing offensively for Texas is star running back Jonathan Brooks left the game with a leg injury, and he's been great for Texas this season with over 1,100 yards and 10 touchdowns. So that is something to keep an eye on. That would be a huge loss to the Texas offense. But they do beat TCU, a game that's a lot closer than it should have been. They remain at number 7. Coming in at number 6, we've got Oregon. They stay at number 6 after a 36-27 win over USC. Bo Nix was great with 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. Wide receivers Troy Franklin and Tez Johnson both had at least 125 receiving yards. Plus, running back Bucky Irving ran the ball well for 118 yards and a touchdown. A great performance for Oregon, a game that was maybe a little closer than it should have been, but Oregon still remains easily the best one-loss team in the country, and they remain at number 6. Number 5, we've got Florida State, so I'm knocking them down one spot from 4 to 5 after a 27-20 win over Miami. That is now back-to-back games for Florida State, where it's a lot closer than it should have been, because Miami hasn't been great lately, and just a 7-point game against them isn't amazing. Plus, last week against Pitt, they won only 24-7, and Pitt is terrible. So, after back-to-back not convincing wins from Florida State, and the combination of Ohio State being great, sees Florida State slide down to number 5, but Florida State is still a very, very good team. I still think they'll make the playoff, but after back-to-back non-convincing performances, they enter at number 5. Number 4, we've got Ohio State. They move up to number 4, which is really just a direct result of me knocking Florida State down to 5. But Ohio State dominated Michigan State as expected. They won 38-3. Marvin Harrison Jr. was insane as usual. He had 7 catches for 149 yards and 2 touchdowns. Plus, he also ran the ball in for a touchdown, and all 3 of his touchdowns came in the first quarter. And for Marvin Harrison Jr., we can't forget about him when talking about the Heisman, because right now he's easily in my top 3 for Heisman rankings at this point. But outside of Marvin Harrison Jr., Ohio State was great, especially defensively, holding Michigan State to just 3 points and 182 total yards, a dominant victory for Ohio State. They enter at number 4. Next week, they take on Minnesota before their big game against Michigan in 2 weeks. Coming in at number 3, we've got Washington. So they beat Utah 35-28. They were good against Utah. It was very windy, which impacted their ability to throw the football, as Michael Penix Jr. completed just over half his passes. But he was still great as usual with 332 yards and 2 passing touchdowns. He also added a rushing touchdown. And there was concerns about the Washington defense, but the defense was great in the second half, shutting out Utah and forcing 2 interceptions. Now, giving up 28 points to a not amazing Utah offense in the first half is not necessarily amazing, but it was good to see the Washington defense play a very good second half, and Washington is 10-0 for the second time in program history, but they still have 2 really tough games on the schedule, plus likely the Pac-12 championship as well. So Washington remains number 3 after their win over Utah. Coming in at number 2, we've got Michigan. So they beat Penn State by a score of 24-15 without Jim Harbaugh. They ran the ball really effectively for 227 yards, and 145 of those yards came from star running back Blake Corum. Michigan didn't throw the ball in the second half. It was all run plays from the midway point of the second quarter on. But because Michigan didn't throw the ball, quarterback J.J. McCarthy finished with 7 completions on 8 attempts for 60 yards. But it was a run game defense that really led Michigan to the win. Their defense was great, holding Penn State to just 15 points. It didn't let Penn State throw the ball. They held Drew Allar under a 50% completion percentage and only allowed 74 passing yards. But a good win for Michigan. Next week they go on the road and visit Maryland, but Michigan remains at number 2. And coming in at number 1, we've got Georgia. So they had a dominant 52-17 win over Ole Miss. From the second quarter on, it was all Georgia. They dominated the line of scrimmage, and offensively they were great. A really balanced offensive attack. Carson Beck threw the ball for 306 yards and 2 touchdowns. And on the ground, Georgia was great as well, with 300 rushing yards and 5 rushing touchdowns. 2 touchdowns each from Kendall Wilton and DeJuan Edwards. And defensively, Georgia was great. They did not let Ole Miss do much, racking up 2 sacks and 5 tackles for loss. And Georgia, after a dismantling of Ole Miss 52-17, they've run number 1. And my updated playoff predictions: 1, we've got Washington, 2, Georgia, 3, Ohio State, 4, Florida State. So I kept the 4 teams the same, just changed around the order. 1 remains Washington. They should be number 1 if they go undefeated and play the schedule they do, because it is insanely hard. 2 is Georgia. I don't think they're going to lose anymore. I've changed my mind. And 3 and 4 is Ohio State and Florida State. I originally had them 2 and 3. They're just falling down 1 spot because I have Georgia up at 2. But those are my Week 12 college ball rankings. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, turn notifications. I do my best to post as often as possible. Let me know in the comments if you agree with my rankings, disagree, and why. But make sure to like, subscribe, comment, turn notifications. I do my best to post as often as possible, and I will see you in the next video.